Oh, hello everyone. This is our first review for the end of the course. My name is Mildred, and this is course 3, Advanced Python for Production Development. And we're going to be looking at our Amazon Web Service, configure our server, and we try to walk through a better method of server configuration. In week 17, we looked at using different methods to install our Flask app on a cloud server. But today we're going to look at a different method of doing the same thing. I'll try to simulate errors because for the first time you will have errors also. And I have discovered that the more errors I have during the class, the easier it is for you to debug errors when you come across them. Okay, just for recap, we have been building the pregnancy registration and maternity reporting system. We use SQL Alchemy as our object relational mapper and Flask for our framework. We want to first of all review how to reset the project if you're coming back after a long time. So if you have your .env, you want to first of all remove it. I already deleted my .env folder here, so I'll create my virtual environment again and then activate and install the dependencies. Part of the prerequisite for this lesson was for you to rewatch week 12 and 13 lessons where we created our AWS account and learn how to create an EC2 instance. And then we also looked at how to manage dependencies using Poetry. So we're going to just go ahead. I won't repeat that because the lecture was clear and explanatory. We're just going to go ahead to try to create a virtual environment and then install our dependencies. So write Python 3 venv.venv, and we say you can give your virtual environment any name you want. I choose to name mine .venv. It's just a convention. And once this is created, you will see that folder here. And the next thing we want to do now is to activate this environment, venv bin/activate. Once activated, you'll find the name of your virtual environment in parentheses here. Now, once you are here, there are a lot of dependencies that you will have for different projects. And the reason we have virtual environment is for you to be able to install packages for a project within the project. And so you don't have conflicting packages when you have more than one project running on the same machine. We have a pyproject.toml file here that lists all the dependencies, all the packages and all the libraries that we need for our project. So because we want to manage this with Poetry, they already mentioned here with the version that we are using. So we want to use Python, anything above 3.11. So instead of trying to install one after the other, which normally we'll do pip install, we're just going to run Poetry install no roots like this. And it's going to install everything that we have in our .toml file. Now, when we get on AWS, there is also a package we want to use that I have not put here because we're not using it on our local environment. But I want to show you how you can install new packages in your local environment even before you get to production. So let's say we want to use Gunicorn, for instance, and I want to add that dependency and install it, right? I don't need to do pip install. I can just do Poetry add Gunicorn like this. And this will add the latest version available and it's installed. When I come back to this file, I'll find that it has added the dependency to the file. So every time I deploy this package somewhere or this is cloned somewhere, they only need to run Poetry install to get all of the dependencies installed. So that's why we use a dependency manager. And for this course, we use Poetry. There are different ways people use. People just have some requirements file, requirement text, and they run that file. But this is more advanced or professional way to do that. So we've done this in our local environment. We can come to our app file and run this file for us to see how this project runs. First of all, we need to make sure we have the database that we have mentioned and it has all the settings that we want. So the database we mentioned in our env file. So we use environment file and we mention the name of the database. We want to make sure we have created it in your SQL workbench and then all the settings or the values for each of them. But we won't do that today. We want to focus on production. So now I'm going to go to my AWS console. One other thing again, after doing this, I can just git status, then I'll add git add and git commit. Let's say update dependencies and I'll push this. So now we have this in the GitHub. So this is the repository. I'll put it in the chat if you want to clone it. We'll keep working with this repository throughout the review. So we have that push to this repository, and we want to now do this in production. Now I want to create a new instance. An instance is just like a server that will make our application available over the internet. And I will come here and click on launch instance. I want to create an Ubuntu server, right? So you give your server a name, and let's call this course. And I want it to be, I will use the Ubuntu image here. And I can see the server machine is Ubuntu server 24.04. Just make sure it is free tier eligible so they don't charge you. Because when you create your accounts, they'll ask for your card details. They say it's just to verify age, I don't know, whatever it is, or so that when you exceed your quota, they can charge. But if you make sure everything you are using is free tier eligible for the first 1 year, they're not charging that payment method. So you want to do everything on that free tier so you don't have to pay for it. Then the instance type, you also make sure you're selecting what is free tier eligible. And then we want to create a key pair. Now, something about this key pair is you need to save it somewhere where you can find it. If not, you won't be able to SSH to the server remotely to configure it. So I want a .pem file, I want an RSA key file. I'll just put the name as course 3 projects. I'll create the pair, and now I'm going to save it on my desktop. Now for security group, we'll want to allow SSH traffic from anywhere. This is not the best settings, but we'll just do it like this. But I'm going to create a new security group. I won't use an existing one. The name is Launch Wizard 10, and it's to allow traffic from anywhere. And then I'm going to launch instance. So once created, I come back to my instances and see. So I see an instance running. I have my instance here running. When I select my checkbox here and I click on connect, it tells me what to do next to be able to connect remotely to this instance. You want to open your terminal. I'm going to clear here and follow this instruction. Now, because I saved my .pem file, that's the key file, on my desktop, I want to, and this is also on the desktop too, so it makes it easy. But first, I want to go back to the desktop and I want to change the permission here. So I'll copy this and I'm going to paste it here to change that permission. And then I want to now SSH to the server. So I'll copy this. So make sure you are in the same directory as your key file, or if you're in a different directory, when you try to connect to this like this, you want to make sure that you put the directory here. So if this was in the document, you want to make sure you put document / the file name for your key file. So to make it easy, I just decided to just be in the same directory where the file is stored. So I'll say yes, and if it's successfully connected, I'll see the IP address of the server here. So I've remotely connected to that server. So when I come back here and I look at, let's go back to the instance, we want to pay attention to the public IPv4 address. This is the private. So we have the public one. We can open this address and we can connect to the site. Make sure it is HTTP, not HTTPS, and go there, and there is nothing here. What we want to do is to use reverse proxy. So instead of using Apache like we did in week 17, we're going to use Nginx this time, so we can see different ways of doing it. And then I'll leave you to debug and find out what errors you come across before we correct them. So now we are here. The next thing we want to do now is to decide which directory we want to install our project. Now we want to clone this from GitHub to the server. But before we do this, we want to first install all the packages that we have. We want to install the packages in a virtual environment. We want the virtual environment in our project. So we want to first of all generate SSH key. So we'll say SSH keygen. And so we'll leave it as a default name, no passphrase. And then I'm going to add this, and then I'm going to copy this. So let me clear so we can see. I'll come here, come to the avatar here, go to settings, SSH and GPG keys, add new key, and let's say close 3 project, and paste that key here and add SSH key. Once this is successful, we can test to see if we can establish a connection. So we can do SSH git at github.com, and we'll say yes. We can say, hi Mildred, you have successfully authenticated, but GitHub does not provide share access. So this is what you want to see. Hi, your GitHub username is what you will find there. So once you are here, it means that you've established a connection. The next thing you want to do is clone your project. And for this, we can have a directory where we want to clone this project, or I want to clone it in the root, the home page here. So I can just go and say git clone. And for me to do this, I want to get the address. So I want to check my repositories, and I will get that repository here. And I'm going to come here, make sure you're on the SSH tab, copy this. And so I'll say git clone, and I'll paste what I copied, and I'll clone it here. So this is clone. And when I list, I'll find my maternity records in here. So if I cd maternity records in a directory, when I list, I'll see all the files that I have. Now take note that our git ignore file here has the env file, which means environment files are not pushed to GitHub. For security reasons, you don't push any sensitive information to GitHub. And so that's why we have environment files, which means that you have to create your environment file on your server. So let's create it by saying sudo nano. The thing about nano is a text editor that we can use for Linux, and if you don't have that file, it creates it. If you have it, it opens it. So I don't have the file. I want to create a file called .env, and in this file I want to write the same thing I have here. So I'll copy this and I'll paste it here. But this time I want to change the value from local to production. I want a database named maternity records, which means we'll create our database. The port will be the default port for my SQL. We leave all of the hosts as local host. We have user, the password, and at some point we also have things like the email address and all that, which I think we already have on the app file when we want to send activation emails in the app. So let's leave it at this. We are going to edit this file as we go along. I'm going to save this, yes, and then we have that file. So every time you want to come back here, you can say sudo nano.env and you file the values to always come here. You control X and it saves and closes. So we have our project here. We have the environment file with all the values. We want to now create a virtual environment so that we can install all the libraries and packages that we need to run this. So SQL Alchemy, PyMySQL, everything we need, we want to install them. So creating a virtual environment on the server is the same thing like you did on your local machine. So say Python 3 mvenv.venv. So I've not installed all of this yet. I'm trying to use this without installation. So the first thing we'll do, first of all, let us install that. Let's install Python, install Python venv so we can use it to create our virtual environment. So I will first install a repository from where I can install Python. So I'll say sudo add apt repository. I think it's ppa then Ngnix. I'm not sure if this is correct. Let's see if it's correct. It will add it. Enter to continue. Okay, yeah, so that's the correct repository. After this, you just want to update the server. So wait for until it's done, and then we'll run sudo apt update, and then let's install Python 3.2. apt install Python 3.12. Yes, and continue. So after installing Python, we want to use the virtual environment. We also want to install Poetry before we can actually run Poetry to install the libraries. And so we'll use coil to do this. Let's say coil ssl install.python. It's pythonpoetry.org. Let's use Python 3. So it's installing Poetry, and you read the instruction carefully. If you don't add this part, you're going to start getting errors. So copy it, because we need to add this in our path environment variable. So I copy and I paste this, and I have added the path. The next thing I want to do now is to now create the virtual environment, because I have installed what I need. So I will use sudo apt install Python 3.12 venv. Sorry, the spelling of install. So we have it now. So we can now use it to create our virtual environment. So we can now say Python 3 mvenv.venv. And so we have the virtual environment created. If we list, and we can see that we have our virtual environment created on our server. So now we want to activate this environment and then install all the libraries or dependencies using Poetry. So .venv/bin/activate, and then we'll now run Poetry install no root, and everything we need has been installed on the server. If along the line you discover you need a package that is not listed on the PyProject.toml file, you just use Poetry add and then the package name. And so the next time, any time you clone the project, you don't need to do Poetry add. It just installs all the dependencies that you have. So I didn't have to install Flask separately, install SQL Alchemy separately. The Poetry installed everything I needed, because I wrote them in the file for managing dependencies. So we've done this environment, we've activated it, we have all our dependencies. One thing we need to have now is MySQL server. So we're going to be using MariaDB MariaDB server before we install MySQL. So you always want to run apt-get update before you start any installation, and then you want to install MariaDB server. So I'll send a note with all of this code. So now we can run MySQL secure installation. So say sudo MySQL secure installation. So this has a lot of prompts that you have to follow. So you want a password for the root user. just set a password. Switch to Unix authentication, I'll say no. Change the root password, I can say yes and provide a new password and re-enter password. Remove anonymous users, yes. Disallow remote login remotely, let me just say no for now. Remove test database and access to it, I'll say yes. And then reload the table, yes. And then we are done. We have MySQL installed. We'll do MySQL u root p. And then to ask us for MySQL password. And the password we created, I'm going to use that. And I should see this prompt that gives me the command line for MySQL server. I can start running MySQL command show databases like we learned in course 2, and it show me all the databases I have. I want to create a new database. I say create database, and the name of our database is maternity records on the environment file, and I have it. If I do show databases again, I have the maternity record. I can say use maternity records, and I am here to see that I have all of this. If we say show tables, we have nothing yet because we have not run the project. So we've done the database already. So this is how we create database on the server. You install the MariaDB server, then you do MySQL secure installation, follow the prompts, change passwords that needs to be changed. So now we're done with the easy part of it. So let's go to the complicated part of the setup. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to set up Gunicorn, and it's a WSGI HTTP server for Python applications. Python cannot run on Apache web server. You have to do some configuration to make it run. And we want to use Nginx. And part of our dependencies in our Py project file was to already have Gunicorn installed. We already have it installed. If we run Poetry update, it will update the dependencies to the latest versions that we have if we have any outdated version. So these are things you need to do. So if we do another advanced course when we do containerizations and we use Docker, for instance, you will see how it's even easy to create an image and use the same image on different servers. So everybody will have exactly the same thing. Okay. So now it has upgraded all of the versions of the different libraries or packages that we have installed previously. So we want to use Gunicorn. We have it already installed. Let's test this thing locally first before we try to do it, put it on the internet. And the way we can do this is to try to run Gunicorn locally. But let's go to our environment file, edit the password for the database so we can work with it. So I'll do sudo nano.env, and I set a password before. Let me come here and I'll just put that password here. So now I want to try to see if this works locally first. I can actually do Python 3 app.py, run the app file to see if this can connect. And it should give me what we normally see on our local machine. So it's working here on port 8080. Okay. We want to try that with Gunicorn, and we'll say Gunicorn 0.0.0.0. I think it's port. Gunicorn runs on 8000 by default, I think. App.app, and let's see if this is running. And this is also running. So we'll have all of this running. And if I close this and I go back to my SQL, I should see that I have my tables created if all is well. And so we have the table users. So we create the users table for us to be able to work with. So this is created. Now we want to have this page, the public IP address. We want to be able to get to this page and see it working. Now it's not working for now. We have it running. If we come to the address here, remove the S, continue, the site cannot be reached. We need to install Nginx for us to start. So I'm going to first of all create a file, a service file, that I'll put some configuration before I enable that service and then install the Nginx. So it has to be in a directory /etc/system, think systemd, then /system. We want the name of this to be maternity record.service. So let me just name it maternity record.service. Specify the working directory, how to keep it running. So when we have this app.run and debug equal to true, we want it to always activate the environment and keep running. So I will have this unit, and we don't need to memorize this. I'll send you what it's supposed to be, and so you just always copy and paste. So description, and I'll tell you what to change. Description is equal to Gunicorn. Let's say Ngnix instance for maternity records, and let's say after is equal to network.target, and then let's specify the service, and this will be the user. The default user here we've seen is Ubuntu, right, for AWS. So let's say user is equal to Ubuntu, and then the group, I'll say www data, and let's specify the working directory. And the working directory here is the home of the Ubuntu home. So say home Ubuntu, and that's the directory where we clone the application. And the name was maternity records, I think. Yeah. So home Ubuntu maternity records, and then let's say exec start should be this directory, but we want to specify for it to always activate it. So the name is .venv/bin/ let's say Gunicorn b localhost export 8000, and then the name of our app file is app. So do app :app, and we'll tell it to restart always. And then let's see install wanted by, let's use multi-user targets. Okay, so all this is doing here is just trying to keep this running. We're creating the service file. I just added the description and also specify the user, the group, the working directory. So if you change the name of the project and it's not maternity records, let's say the name of the project is a different project. Maybe you're building a tax app and your name is tax app. This name will change to tax app, right? The same thing here. Your environment, your virtual environment file. Mine, I named it .venv. So if yours is not .venv, maybe you name it my environment or my virtual environment. That's the name you put here. /bin /Gunicorn. So there's a typo here, and let me come here to make sure I correct it. So it's N, not M, and then localhost 8000, because I think that's the port where Gunicorn always runs by default. If it's wrong, we'll change it later. So I save this, and then I want to now start the service. So I'll say sudo systemctl daemon reload, and then I will start it. And the name of the service was maternity records, right? And then I'm going to enable it. Okay, so everything is done here, and let's check if all is well. It should be running. I want to install Nginx first before we can actually see it on the web. So I'll say sudo apps install Nginx. Then I'm going to start it and I'll enable it. Okay, we've installed Nginx. We need to configure like a virtual host file for it. So we have welcome to Nginx, which means that we've successfully installed it when we come to this. I will try as much as possible. I'll think of an error to simulate for us to get common errors you get with Nginx, like forbidden errors or error, or you get error like this server is not working or something if one configuration is wrong. And we'll try to simulate that. If not, I'll just leave a note about the different errors you can encounter while you do that. So there is a directory where we have the default configuration, and if you refer back to week 17 lessons, you will see how we did that for Apache. It is similar, only that we want to configure a reverse proxy to be able to run Python on a server. So I'll go to sudo nano /etc/nginx/site available/ there's a default file here, and it opens this file. I want to edit this file to put an upstream and also edit the location. Now, when I come here, just before the server configuration here, I want to add upstream. For the upstream, what I want to add here is a server address. So once for server, and we know it's localhost 127.0.0.1 port 8000. And then I want to look at this one, and I want to just look for the location where it is. The root of our application is not in the www directory. It's at the home directory, so I can leave it as / like this. And then the server name, let's leave that for now. If we need it, we'll come back and put it there. But the location is here. I want to put proxy pass here. So let's proxy pass HTTP. Let me just put a name, maternity records, like that. I'm not sure this will work. Maybe we'll be able to get the error we want. So once we do this, we want to restart Nginx. So I'll save this, and then I'll sudo systemctl restart Nginx. Sorry, spelling is wrong here. Okay, there's an error here. I want to see what the error is to make it faster. And configuration test failed because of the invalid number of arguments in upstream directory. Okay, so I know what it is, and I'll go back there to the file. Now I'll come to the upstream. What I did not do was to give it a name, because here I have, let me see what I did here. Here I have this name, maternity record here. Let me give that up there. So let me save this and let's restart. Okay, now it's restarted successfully, and let's see if we have. So we had a bad gateway. Now this is one of the errors I want to have, so that you can know how to debug errors in the future. Okay, for this bad gateway, what we're going to do now is to look at the logs. I want to show you where the error log for Nginx is found. It's similar to where you find for Apache, but this time we're going to look at it for the Nginx. Sudo nano var log Nginx error.log. So here it will tell us what. So it failed connection refused while connecting to upstream here. So we know what the error is because you can read what the log is. So this is the host and is not able to connect to this, and it gives us the failure notice. So why did this error happen is what we are going to debug. And I want you to get to this stage, and it's just a single line change that will change this. But I want you to get to this point and for us to be able to read logs, for you to always know that when you have an error. Now, for most of you, once you start configuring this, you see different errors, but you always want to come to this file to know what your error is or why it's not working the way it's supposed to work. And then if you need extra help, you want to paste that error, and I'll tell you what the error means and what you need to do. So here we have connection refused while connecting to upstream, and we're going to figure that out, or I'm going to show you what it is and what the error is in another lesson. Anyone has a question?
No.
So I'll make both the video and maybe I'll just create a note that has all of the code that we use here available, so you can create your own server, configure it this way to get to this point, and we will conclude this and now go to the next lesson where we'll look at the functions and then conclude the functionalities of what happens when someone successfully creates an account or when someone successfully logs into the account. That's what we're going to look at in the next lesson. I will send out a message to let you know when this week we might have a lesson on Thursday to conclude this one, but I'll let you know a day prior. All right. Does anyone have question? All right. So thank you, everyone, and I will let you know about the next lesson by Wednesday.